welcome to the St. Lucia House of Assembly on this, the second day of the debate on the Appropriations Bill of $1,856,719,000. Yesterday, we heard from a number of parliamentarians. We opened the morning with the member for Castries Southeast, Joachim Henry, followed by the member for Dennery South, who is the Minister of Agriculture. Then we had Mr. Alfred Prosper, the representative for Micoud North. That's the Minister for Agriculture, Alfred Prosper, who is the member for Dennery South, I beg your pardon, and the member for Micoud North, Jeremiah Herbert. In the afternoon, we heard from the member for Soufrière Foncé Jacques Emma Hippolyte, and then opposition member Bradley Felix, who is also the rep for Choiseul Saltibus. And in the evening, we heard from the Minister for Health, who is the member for Vieux-Fort North, and the Minister for Education, Sean Edward, who is the member for Dennery South. We also heard during that period from the Minister of Health, Moses Jean-Baptiste. We are awaiting the arrival of the Speaker, who should be here momentarily to begin today's proceedings. But just to take a look back at the achievements of this administration over the past year, Prime Minister Philippe J. Pierre has been able to live up to a number of the promises made in the Labour Party's manifesto for the last general election, which was back on the 21st of July 2021. The Speaker, I notice, is on his way up and should be here in the House in the next, well, he's just arrived, and we are about to start today's debate.
Let us pray. Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we thine unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the King, the public weal, peace, and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all forevermore. Amen.
Good morning, members, and let me begin by apologizing for the late start, and that I can assure members was entirely beyond their own control, external forces. In fact, I have apologies from the member for Vieux-Fort North and the member for Choiseul Saltibus, who are both stuck in traffic and running late. Having said that, when we rose last night, question before the Honorable House was that the Appropriation 2023-2024 bill be read a second time. The member for Castries North.
Some more than as usual.
Mr. Speaker, permit me this opportunity this morning to thank the Almighty God for bringing us here with good health. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that we are at a critical juncture in the politics and the administration of our country. And the time has come when those of us who are called upon to serve will do so regardless of whether being in government or being in opposition. The trend we have seen in most recent times, Mr. Speaker, is one in which there are individuals who believe that they're entitled to lead, probably not to serve, entitled to be in charge and not to be a follower, entitled to give instructions and to dictate from behind and not fall in line. But Mr. Speaker, we who are here must understand that we are leaders our people look up to, particularly our children, and so our conduct must be one which resonates in the minds and in the hearts of our people to be proud of. Some of what that has taken place in most recent times indicates the level to which a few have established themselves. And so, Mr. Speaker, their behavior will do nothing but to continue on a downward slide into degradation. And so for us who are on this side, we must stand firm to our commitment of serving the people and not be ashamed to say we are putting the people first. Because the purpose for which we are appointed, the purpose for which we are elected, is for the purpose of the cause of the people of this country. And so let us not lose sight of that cause. And so, Mr. Speaker, when I listened to the Prime Minister, Minister for Finance, on Tuesday, when he delivered his budget address, as it is called, under the theme Health and Security, the Pillars of Sustainability, I thought not only that theme set the foundation, it also set the tone for the direction in which the government is heading. More so, Mr. Speaker, as he delved into the meat of the matter and presented it to us, I couldn't help but reminisce on what was said previously about a month ago and what was said again on Tuesday regarding the performance of the government and what the government has done. And I often say that unless we blow our trumpet, unless we speak about what we do, unless we tell the narrative it may fall on deaf ears. It may fall on deaf ears because there are those who are making noises, empty vessels, those who will have all kind of, imaginations and things to do to distract people. And so we shall not be distracted. So when I read, Mr. Speaker, on page 8 of the Prime Minister's statement, where he says, in my last budget, we promised and delivered paid facility fees for 24,000 primary and secondary school students, procured 10,000 electronic devices for students under the one laptop per child program, made available 1,200 MiFi devices to households to assist students with distributed learning, paid CXC maths and English fees for all secondary schools, secure low-cost ICT services for income households at $20 per month for 5,000 households, and that's the program with Flow, the Flow Communication Bundle. And next Tuesday, I'm meeting with Digicel to finalize our negotiations, a similar program with Digicel, which will cover another 5,000 or more children. Mr. Speaker, you go on further. The allocation of $7 million to the home care program to secure care for the elderly, a program that was tampered with by the last administration against advice. The provision of additional $10 million to the Ministry of Equity to provide social assistance. And the list goes on, Mr. Speaker. And it brought me to the famous Jamaican artist, Gramps Morgan, who sings People Like You, a song which was penned originally by Johnny Reed. And in that song, Mr. Speaker, he says, if you give a little more than you take, and if you try to fix more than you break, if you're the kind who takes the time to help a stranger in the rain, there's a place for people like you. And that is quite appropriate, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister for Finance and all of us who are here who continue to give service, to give a little more than we take, and to fix more than we break. And that is so, Mr. Speaker, appropriate, because we could have been on the street today and not inside this Parliament having this debate. Because like many other institutions, or if I should say structures of government, they were broken down and not one built. So whether it is the police headquarters on the instruction of the father of a politician, or the custody suites for which we are called upon to rebuild, to reconstruct, Mr. Speaker, they were breaking down more than they were fixing. They were breaking down the constitution of this country, Mr. Speaker, the laws of the land. Because for 5 years, Mr. Speaker, 5 years, notwithstanding the fact that the law says we must have a deputy speaker, they did it with impunity and refused for 5 years, almost moving on to 6 years, without a deputy speaker. And yet, Mr. Speaker, they come in this Parliament and attempt to dictate at what stage should they make their presentation in representation of the people. And then attempt, Mr. Speaker, to say that they have looked at the standing orders which they disrespected in their time and cannot find anywhere in the standing orders which speaks to the order of speakers. But they disregarded, Mr. Speaker. They violated the constitution of the land and felt it was good to do so. All they did, Mr. Speaker, was to break rather than to fix. And then they dig into triviality, Mr. Speaker. When we speak of all the things that we have done in this country in the last 2 years, just under 2 years, an attempt to make an issue about the fact that this government decided to fulfill its promise of establishing a youth economy. But what they don't understand, Mr. Speaker, no matter how they twist it, an attempt to make it appear that there are programs going on, there are programs. Why set up a youth economy? What they don't understand, Mr. Speaker, that what we have done is to formalize, institutionalize, and legislate the youth economy, demonstrating a clear commitment to the development of young people. So it's not a program that you go somewhere, it existed today and doesn't exist tomorrow. It's not a program that can be adopted and then forgotten. It's a program that is enshrined in law. And if you know this government and you understand this government to date, you'll know that this government is a law-abiding government, and so the youth economy is a demonstration of our economy, a demonstration of our commitment. And that is what we stand for, Mr. Speaker. And we went on, as the Minister for Finance went on. He said subsidized price of fuel, flour, and rice. Significant. But they would ignore the fact that the government is doing all of this and then speak about the government making $70 million this last financial year. But Mr. Speaker, this is what we got. This is what we take if you want to go according to the words. But we have given more. We have given more with the reduction of VAT. We have given more with the contributions that we have made. $10 million one place, another $18.3 million, $7.3 million, $800,000, Mr. Speaker. If you go on, the list goes on, Mr. Speaker. And I'm sure as you multiply and add what the government has given in the last year and a half plus, you'll find in the true spirit of Gramps Morgan, we have given a little more than we have taken. My dear friend from Choiseul is smiling because he understands that. He understands what that means to the people of this country. And so, as I said earlier on, Mr. Speaker, we cannot fail to articulate and to let the message, the narrative be heard throughout this country. We just cannot allow this to happen, Mr. Speaker. And I do hope that we all can find the spirit and the energy to ensure that this is not allowed. And so, Mr. Speaker, you move on with the program of the government and you see the performance of the economy, the growth of the economy. And the only way you can have growth is prudent management. The prudent management of a captain, of one who we say there's a place for people like you, who understands what it is to give and to take, but to give more, to build and to fix and not break, Mr. Speaker. And one who understands if you find a stranger and you find time and give a kind hand, there's a place for people like you. Mr. Speaker, these are the tenets of this administration. What we stand for, what we do, and how we go about doing it. The presentation, Mr. Speaker, is laced with successes of this administration. It is laced with things that the administration has done. And therefore, with all that we have done, Mr. Speaker, we understand that there are problems. We understand that there are issues that we as a government must fix. Issues that wasn't created in 1 year or 1 year and a half, but issues which have accumulated over time. And having recognized the issues of the country, Mr. Speaker, the government is saying health and security a must. And having said health and security, we are saying to all of those who believe that it is a problem, that the government must fix the problem, we are saying put your money where your mouth is and let us make a contribution to that cause of fixing health and security. A small contribution. We started, Mr. Speaker, we started by saying health is too important to allow it to go down the drain at the rate it was heading. And the first decision we took, Mr. Speaker, was to go to St. Jude and do a quick analysis of the situation at St. Jude to determine the status of the St. Jude project and to put a team of competent individuals and say, you go down there and tell us what the problems are down at St. Jude. We didn't pay a cent to get it done. And if the PM ever paid, you must tell me, because as far as I'm aware, we didn't. But they paid $1 million for one man to give a report. One man to give a report. Okay? And if we give a little more than we take. And that is the message. This government has constantly looked for ways and means of getting the job done without taking too much. And there are too many instances of the former administration taking more than they gave. So that was our first commitment of looking at St. Jude. And we realized that in St. Jude, we can go in and get that job done. Let us go to the original structure, and I believe the Prime Minister at some stage will be in a position to give even more details as to what is happening and how we will get that job done at St. Jude by giving more than we take. You look at, Mr. Speaker, the narrative on the St. Lucia Social Development Fund and the great work that is being done under that program, giving more than we take. You look at this Christmas stimulus, $3.2 million, and I'm one who will say we need to put a little more. Put $5 million for the Christmas stimulus. But we are prudent. But we are prudent and, beg your pardon? Subject to the availability of funds. We are prudent, Mr. Speaker. We are prudent managers. And while we are always willing to give more than we take, we understand what it is when we do not have as much to give more than we can ever take. The Easter stimulus, Mr. Speaker, $3.2 million. Education assistance, $2 million. Hope, $1.014 million. Short-term employment, $6.8 million, Mr. Speaker, and pre-hurricane cleanup, $1.5 million. A government who responds, a government who understands the need of the people, Mr. Speaker. That's the government of the St. Lucia Labour Party and the Blue Wave. So, Mr. Speaker, and you move on, and you heard of the program for the land rationalization and resettlement. A program, Mr. Speaker, that is designed to resolve a number of issues. A program that is designed to go in and get it done and energize the proud to get that program going and to resettle people and to give them the necessary resources so as to have a comfort in their living. You know, one of the problems, Mr. Speaker, that many people face with in this country is the unavailability of land easily. Land is expensive, and those who have it, they've all got all sorts of conditions. At the same time, there are people, all that they can do is to rent an apartment, Mr. Speaker, and they cannot afford it. The conditions of some of those apartments, Mr. Speaker, are, degrading. But what we have seen, Mr. Speaker, is those persons who are in need, who are able, if they're given an opportunity with a piece of land, they will build a decent little house. And that is what this program is about. Attempting to make land available through the Crown and to give those persons an opportunity to build. At the same time, the Department of Housing assists with housing assistance, and SSDF also assists with housing assistance under the normal programming. So, Mr. Speaker, this government, even though the naysayers will say, well, nothing has happened, they have done nothing, nothing is going on, they have stopped them on the new St. Lucia that was being planned. But the new St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker, was being given to people without money. They came to our shores empty pockets. We gave them thousands of acres, while we are now complaining about St. Lucians who are committed to the development of this country and consider them to be non-entities. Non-entities. Mr. Speaker, this government is about giving opportunity. We give you an opportunity into a world of possibilities, rather than to bring the world without any money with the promise of developing the country. You know, Mr. Speaker, one day my barber was telling me, he asked me a question. He said, Mr. King, how do you all go about deciding on investors? How do you know an investor is a true investor? I said, well, they'd come with a proposal and it would be looked at, due diligence would have been done, etc., and whatnot. I gave him a whole litany of what is required. He said, but I don't believe that's what it is. I said, why? He said, well, my friend told me he met a little white boy, and I'm sorry to say white boy, he met a little white boy in town, and the little white boy said he was somewhere in the US in New York walking down the street, and he met a prominent politician here. And they ended up having a chat and whatnot. So the white boy started bluffing his way around and said that he's an investor and he has money, etc., etc. And the next thing, he landed in St. Lucia, was able to apply for concessions, and he got everything.
Wow.
Okay? He got everything. So, Mr. Speaker, the point I'm making is, we at all times must exercise due diligence, and this government is one you can look to when it comes to due diligence. Mr. Speaker, I am one who believes that we, as I said early on, must put our money where our mouth is. The issue of the removal of VAT on plywood, lumber, steel, cement, and galvanized. One may say, well, it's great. I guess they may denounce it. I guess they may denounce it, Mr. Speaker. But if we look at it objectively, and you probably do the maths, you may say, well, what is the country losing by giving plywood, lumber, steel, cement, and galvanized, given the waiver of VAT? We may be losing more than the $70 million that we're making on fuel, I'm sure. But I'll wait for the verdict. So we may be losing much more. But, Mr. Speaker, what this initiative is doing is just not necessarily the 12.5% that we are giving to all and sundry, it may appear, to the poor, the marginalized, the middle, and the upper class. But what it is doing, Mr. Speaker, once you're able to do that, is to stimulate the activity through the construction sector. Because it means now that there are people who will say, it is time for me to build. The businessmen will say, it is a good time to build because the VAT is off. And so there will be an acceleration of investment as a consequence of this small initiative, where business people will say, the environment is conducive, let me start construction of my project. In fact, it would do a number of things. It will provide employment, that you may lose the VAT, 12.5%, but your service charge will be collected, And because the volume has increased, your service charge will reflect an increase in revenue for the period of time. I'm trying to build one. I will build one at this time in Choiseul. I'm coming close to you. So, Mr. Speaker, these are the kinds of initiatives. These are thoughtful initiatives. These are not initiatives that are just, flown up in the air and taken. These are initiatives where the government has taken time to give consideration and to look at it and to see, if I give this, how much can I get? And that's the spirit of the budget, Mr. Speaker. The other one, Mr. Speaker, is the waiver of VAT and other taxes, which is somewhere in the vicinity of 600 million EC dollars, which of course comprises the principal, the VAT, the penalties, and the interest. I ran it by a businessman only yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and he said, well, I owe the government quite a bit of taxes, and it's somewhere in the vicinity of $10 million. He said, you know what happened? I'm going and get a loan to pay all my taxes because I will get it waived. That is the impact of this initiative, Mr. Speaker. It is being prepared to take the bold decisions, to take those bold decisions, but knowing that those decisions will have a positive impact on the other side, and then they will come forward and give the government what is due to it. So just imagine, Mr. Speaker, one businessman who owes $10 million is saying, I am going to go and take a loan and pay the $6 million that I owe the government. Just imagine, Mr. Speaker, if 10 businessmen in this country, and I'm sure there are more than 10, if 10 businessmen in this country, they owe 600 million. Just imagine the 600 million. If 300 million is really penalties and interest. Just imagine, Mr. Speaker, those individuals all go to get a loan just to clear the taxes, the impact that will have on the revenue of the country of this, the revenue of the government of this country. So, Mr. Speaker, this is the creativity of the budget. This is the imagination of the budget. This is the sensitivity of the budget, Mr. Speaker. This is the compassion of the budget. The compassion for the people who need it. The creativity to ensure that your decisions will bring reward. And to make sure that you maintain your country on an even keel to reflect economic growth and development, and to stimulate the economy, and to encourage and give hope to young people through the youth economy, to give hope to small business through the MSME, to give hope to the ordinary man, the fishers, by giving them $1 rebate, to say to them, we understand what you're going through. We appreciate the service you're giving to this country, so we're giving you back something. That's what this government is about. We're not just taking, we are giving back. So, Mr. Speaker, I really hope that our people understand what we're doing. So when we come to you and we say to you that we are introducing a 2% levy for health and security, and you begin to see your security in the country improving, and the police are responding, and you begin to feel safe in this country, then you realize the health services are improving. That when you go to the health center, to the clinic, to the wellness centers, and to the hospitals, you realize the services are improving. You will understand the importance of the 2%. And so, Mr. Speaker, having said this, I want to move to my ministry. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister, in his budget address, spoke of the work that the Ministry of Infrastructure will undertake in this financial year. Of course, whereas the theme of the budget did not reflect the Department of Infrastructure, we understand the purpose of the budget. But with this, the department has a number of projects, critical projects, that we are already engaging in. The Department of Infrastructure will, in this year, accelerate its general maintenance of St. Lucia's road network to attend to urgent maintenance needs on our roads, bridges, and other public infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, this is important because in the last year we were challenged with the climatic conditions, climate change, heavy rainfalls, and some of them ridiculed us and said, well, you know, the science and all this sort of thing, you all talk about science, and you can't fix roads in the rain. I want them to go and fix their road in the rain. So we have decided this year, and the Prime Minister has more or less agreed, that if only we can be given upfront, early in the financial year, the resources, our road maintenance program will continue unabated. I am sure those of you who drive around, because all of us drive anyway, who drive around, I'm sure you realize that throughout the country, particularly our primary road network, we have done quite a bit of work in terms of maintenance. And so I must take this opportunity to thank the Prime Minister, who this year, towards the end of the year, gave us an additional $2.5 million to go into road maintenance and to do the volume and the quality of work that you see happening on our roads. Mr. Prime Minister, let me assure you that we will continue to persevere and to pursue the agenda which you have given us. In fact, so as to motivate the men, I've requested and planned a special appreciation event for them in the next 2 Fridays after the jazz. And I'm hoping that Prime Minister, you and other colleagues will be able to come into that event so that you can express your appreciation. And if you have any disappointments, you can also express those disappointments. Mr. Speaker, the purpose of this is to show appreciation, and that's what this government is all about. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of critical roads or infrastructure that we are continuing. The Millennium Highway, which we have been speaking about for a long time, Millennium Highway and West Coast Road project continues. A number of community roads are currently receiving attention under the Design, Finance, Construct model. And it is anticipated that once government's prudential fiscal limits under the DFC model is satisfactorily achieved, a number of other communities will see improvements to their roads. Of course, I've got to ensure that in so doing that the Prime Minister has that space. He has that space to be able to recommit himself to doing any more DFCs. Because while we would like to do what the people need, we also have to understand we cannot overburden the resources of the country if we do not have it. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we are now moving into the Renewable Energy Sustainable Development Project, and that I will go back to later. So the first major project, Mr. Speaker, the Millennium Highway and West Coast Road project, that project was funded under the CDB, through the CDB, sorry, under what is called the UK CIF grant funding, United Kingdom Caribbean Infrastructure Fund. Cost of $43,287,000. The project is to improve and rehabilitate the Millennium Highway, which is 6.2 kilometers, the reconstruction of 24.6 kilometers on the west coast, which goes from Bannans Bay, from cul-de-sac through to Ansari and ending at Columbet, and the construction of what I call the South Bridge at Ancillary. The Millennium Highway is from the Bannans roundabout to the cul-de-sac junction, where a new roundabout is being constructed, and that will connect to the West Coast Road. We have had some problems, Mr. Speaker, in the last 18 or rather 22 months with the present contractor on the Millennium Highway. That project, Mr. Speaker, is behind time. The project should have completed in March. We are now in April, going into May, and so, Mr. Speaker, the contractor has been asked to speed up because it is too far gone. Even though it's only 27% attained, we need to get the project going, because the project, that is the Millennium Highway, is holding back the other segments of the road. For example, the Japanese funded and constructed Japanese bridge in cul-de-sac, that bridge has been completed in record time, within time. Excellent work. Within the budget. Completed, and it's amazing when you have two contractors working in the same environment, that one is able to come in and get the job done and move out, while the other one is there to use the local parlance, TTV, and trying to find reasons why it cannot be done. But, Mr. Speaker, that road is important so as we can move on to the West Coast Road, for which a contractor is in country, having received a contract through the Caribbean Development Bank. Now, Mr. Speaker, I need to probably at this time just segue a little bit and to speak about the second and third phases of the the West Coast Highway. And it is probably an issue that is troubling a few people because of what they have seen ever since the contractor landed here over the weekend. There are those who are saying that, well, you know, they have come with all the equipment, huge equipment, etc., etc., and there's so much equipment in St. Lucia, and we're not given an opportunity. Mr. Speaker, it was an international tender. Mr. Speaker, this government is very, very, very conscious of the needs of our people. We are very caring, and we always look out for our people. Mr. Speaker, the tender which was issued for this project was an international tender. The funding for the project came from the UK government as a gift to the Caribbean, St. Lucia being one of the islands benefiting from that gift. Jamaica, Dominica, Antigua, they all got their own portion. St. Lucia got $43 million. The terms and condition for any CDB project demands international participation, particularly from member countries, all the member states. So the member states of the CDB are the CARICOM region, and the lending countries, the UK, China, Canada, and I think it's Brazil, or one of them. But the lending countries, those countries who have come forward to say that we are prepared to buy or participate in the bank as a lending partner, you are the borrowing partners, but whenever there are tenders, we believe it must be internationally put out there. The bidding document, Mr. Speaker, is very specific. And the bidding document says that as a contractor, you've got to demonstrate that you have capacity. You've got to demonstrate that you have capacity. Not just a name, like asphalt and mining, and you come with your hands swinging. But a name and equipment and personnel and expertise. But it also says, Mr. Speaker, that that contractor must also subcontract to local contractors. These are the conditions. When the contract was first negotiated, Mr. Speaker, or when it was first put out there, the international tender, the ratio between the contractor, the successful contractor, and the subcontractors was 70-30. 70-30. That means the contractor would be able to have it's 60-40. The contractor would be able to have 60% in terms of the direct involvement, and the subcontractors would be given 40% award of contracts. Upon review, we decided, Mr. Speaker, in this contract, and remember the one which was done, the first contract was done in 2021 or thereabout, 2021, Mr. Speaker. It was signed in May of 2021. And so, Mr. Speaker, having done that, this government said we need to get a little more. And what we have done is to reverse the ratio and to allow local tenders to be able to get as much as 70% portion of the tendering, the subcontracting process. So in other words, there are greater opportunities under the arrangement that's made here. But Mr. Speaker, what is also interesting is that the tender document indicated the pieces of equipment that are required for the project. So the list is here. It says 15-ton or higher hydraulic excavators, 15 tons or higher hydraulic elevators, excavators, sorry. Okay, and they gave you the list. It says there, any single lot 1, lot 2B 2, any combination of lots excluding 2B 2, and any combination of 2 or more lots including lot 2B 3. So in other words, just for that one piece of equipment, a combination. So they tell you, so if you go down there, there shouldn't be more than one 15-ton or higher hydraulic excavator. Now, Mr. Speaker, with all the equipment we have around, it may be very difficult to get a 15-ton hydraulic excavator. I may be wrong. But you know one of the problems we have in St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker, everybody has an excavator. Everybody has an excavator. They have backhoe. They have all kinds of things. When you call them and you say, listen, we have a job for you, and they say, yes, I want it, they take 3, 4, 5 days before they can mobilize. I had a joke, Mr. Speaker, we had a project to do somewhere, and a contractor, an equipment operator said, yes, he can make it. And it took him so long to get there, even when he got there, the equipment broke down by the time it dipped for once into the river. But we need to organize ourselves. The 20-ton tipper trucks, Mr. Speaker, 20-ton, 3. 200 HP motor grader, 1. And the list goes on, Mr. Speaker, indicating the number of pieces of equipment that are required. So the equipment that is there, Mr. Speaker, that you see out there, which will be engaged in the reconstruction of the West Coast Road, which comprises some 64 kilometers. Okay? Some 64 kilometers, Mr. Speaker. That equipment is not all of the equipment that is required. And so I do hope that I've explained it sufficiently for those who are concerned about the number of equipment that they have seen stacked up in the cul-de-sac valley, and for those who are concerned of the impact that will have on their own business here in St. Lucia. And so, Mr. Speaker, that's lot 2 and lot 1 and lot 2. Lot 2, to speed up, will take in the cul-de-sac bridge to Anseray, the Anseray bridge to Canaries, Canaries to Soufrière, and the total cost of that is $47.2 million. As I said, Mr. Speaker, the cul-de-sac bridge is complete, and I must take some time at this occasion on behalf of the government and people of St. Lucia to extend our wishes, our best wishes and thanks, sincere thanks and gratitude to the government and people of Japan for this landmark bridge in cul-de-sac, to date the longest bridge in St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, now that the bridge has been completed, we are now in the process of negotiating with the Japanese to do a second bridge, and this one, Mr. Speaker, will be done again in the cul-de-sac basin, more or less, at Ferrans. That, Mr. Speaker, will help improve the hydraulics of the river, because as they build the bridges, they build them wider, longer, and higher. And of course, the passage is expanded to allow for free flow of water, thus creating the kind of hydraulics necessary to speed up the flow in the basin. Mr. Speaker, one of the projects which we have just completed, which was done by the last government, started with the last government, is the RIM, Road Improvement Management Program, Phase 4, and that project is nearing completion. In fact, it has come to an end, and we are just going through the defects liability period. And for this, Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank the people, government and people of the Republic of China, Taiwan, for the collaboration and the generosity they have extended to St. Lucia over the years. There are some other specific areas, Mr. Speaker, I would like to now go into quickly. For this financial year, Mr. Speaker, one project which has been identified and for which I have received, Mr. Speaker, quite a bit of pressure from the parliamentary representative who is absent today, is the construction of the Austin Hill Road, costing $750,000, Mr. Speaker, and that is located somewhere in the constituency of Dennery North. I haven't visited it yet, Mr. Speaker, but I will go and see that road and to ensure that it is done. We also have, Mr. Speaker, an amount of $2.5 million for slope stabilization, retaining walls, and that, Mr. Speaker, is an annual program to assist in places where the walls are coming down and we need to stabilize the slopes. $2.5 million, not necessarily sufficient, Mr. Speaker, but it's even better than what it was last year, and I thank the Minister for Finance for this allocation. Bridges and culverts, Mr. Speaker, an allocation of $1.9 million has been given to demolish the existing cul-de-sac bridge and to assist in the reconstruction of a number of bridges and strengthening of a number of bridges. Some of them include the Shock Bridge, which we are hoping that we can repair rather than reconstruct at this time, because those of you who drive, I'm sure you'll realize there is a dip on that bridge. It means that the AMCO pipes at the bottom of the bridge is now collapsing because of age. It's not one of those ordinary deck bridges. It's one which is designed with two huge cylindrical pipes, and those pipes are now deteriorating. Also, we're looking at Trumase Bridge, Parliamentary Bridge, which has been very problematic over the years. Every now and then we've got to go in there and try to underpin it. Then you have the Dennery Main Bridge and the Boskidor Bridge. All of these, Mr. Speaker, are bridges that we need to undertake. But, Mr. Speaker, recently we did invest in some equipment, both in the lab and, of course, alongside the engineering unit. And one of the systems we have introduced, Mr. Speaker, is a system called an asset management system, a road maintenance management system. And that is to allow us to avoid what has happened in the past. In the past, what you recognize is that the Ministry of Infrastructure, or the Department of Infrastructure, was simply responding. They were reactive. The improvement in the asset management system, Mr. Speaker, allows for continuous inspection and an assessment of bridges, on culverts, and the roads itself, to see the level of stress and deterioration that is taking place, and to respond in a timely manner. So instead of being reactive, we're being proactive. And hopefully, if the system is applied properly, Mr. Speaker, we will see less sudden crashes of the landscape, And bridges, as we have seen, the Badlil is one place where we have had a number of mudslides and landslides, and most times we are not ready for such, and we have to be running helter-skelter to make sure we put things in place. So the asset management system would help in that regard. We have, Mr. Speaker, also reconstruction and rehabilitation of roads, and the allocation, it's sort of small, $4 million. Ideally, Mr. Speaker, if we are to respond to the reconstruction and rehabilitation of roads based on the, the rate at which roads are deteriorating, we really would need to spend $20 million a year. And spending $20 million a year to reconstruct and rehabilitate, then you put your asset management system in place, and if that is again administered properly, then roads would last beyond the pavement strength. And most roads are designed to have a pavement strength for, the Minister of Health would know, life expectancy in human beings. What's the life expectancy of male and female? And in the case of roads, they don't say life expectancy because roads have no life, but they have a pavement strength, and based on the pavement strength, it would determine how long that road would last. Most roads are designed, Mr. Speaker, for 10, 15, 20 years. So we are hoping that when we put those systems in place, Mr. Speaker, we will be able to monitor and to be able to extend the life of the road, or the integrity of the road for a longer period. Because if you can do that, then it means you can do preemptive maintenance and to extend it. Mr. Speaker, water costs maintenance. We are now revisiting the issue of the silting. The silting is a word in our communities that people believe can solve all their problems, apart from the silting. And so, Mr. Speaker, we realize the impact of the silting on our landscape itself. Because what happens, Mr. Speaker, is when you go in, and the Minister for Agriculture is not here, and we have to work hand in glove, because he spoke about the riverbanks, the riverbanks, but of course, the riverbanks are to protect the river course. But when we get into the rivers and we start extracting what is there, then we cause the rivers to improve its hydraulics, and as a result of the improvement in the hydraulics, then what you have is
Member for Castries North, you have 10 minutes left.
Yes. Just give me another 10. 15.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to invoke Standing Orders 3210 to allow the Honourable Member an extra 15 minutes to complete his presentation.
Honourable Members, the question is that Standing Order 3210 be invoked to allow the Member for Castries North an additional 15 minutes in which to conclude his presentation. And now for the question, as many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Proceed, Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will move on quickly so as to attempt to conclude my presentation. So I was speaking of the silting, Mr. Speaker, and the new approach, and that is maintenance of of water courses, and that will attempt to ensure that we protect the riverbed and work with the Department of Agriculture in the protection of the riverbank. Maintenance of government buildings, Mr. Speaker, $1.68 million. Mr. Speaker, it is okay, but we need to revisit the issue of government buildings. Government buildings, Mr. Speaker, must be maintained. We cannot continue to abandon government buildings because of mold, because of whatever it is, and most of the government buildings, Mr. Speaker, that we abandon are not the problem isn't structural. It is air quality. It is mold. It's just sick buildings, Mr. Speaker. And the only thing that can solve sick buildings is to ensure that you have a maintenance regime that will extend the life of those buildings. That is what we need, Mr. Speaker, and I'm hoping that at some stage we'll be able to take this into consideration and deal with that aspect of government buildings. We have to take it serious, Mr. Speaker, because even the quality of paint that is used, we issue contracts to small contractors. They go and buy cheap paint. It is not mold resistant, not mildew resistant, and then we end up with mold and mildew. The Department of Infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, will be undertaking a study to really try and understand the issue of sick buildings and the mold infestation throughout the public service. Because at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, we have to take action and stop moving out there and renting buildings. The Prime Minister will tell you the rental charges, the rental fees that we pay. Look, now we've been committed, Mr. Speaker, to a building at Bois d'Orange. $1 million a month, I'm told. We can build a new building for ourselves. So, Mr. Speaker, the idea is to look at the design and construction of buildings, look at the air quality, look at the refrigeration, the plumbing and electronics and the mechanical instruments of the building, and make sure that whatever we're doing is good and will not interfere with our buildings. And finally, Mr. Speaker, the caretaker and maintenance, what we call the caretaker maintenance program, $1.6 million, Mr. Speaker. Again, good, but if at all, Mr. Speaker, we are truly serious about tourism, then we must be truly serious about our environment. We must be able to maintain our environment, maintain the roads, maintain the curbs, the vegetation, to instead of just simply debushing, we need to be manicuring our environment so that it looks pristine. When people come in here, they can see an environment that is beautiful, flowers and lawns, etc., etc. But that will call for a greater investment than $1.6 million. Mr. Speaker, let me move quickly to Renewable Energy Sector Development Project, which is a geothermal project in Soufrière. And I know there's a lot of talk going on about renewable energy. There are a lot of gurus out there, Mr. Speaker, who understand it probably more than I do, and who probably have greater answers than I do. And there are people also, Mr. Speaker, who are very energetic in getting it going, who are very, very, very confident about that sector and the expectation of the sector in terms of what it can do to reduce costs and to increase productivity in this country. But, Mr. Speaker, we in St. Lucia, we did develop and we continue to follow it. We have developed what is called the National Energy Transition Strategy, which more or less speaks to where we should go with energy: geothermal, solar, wind, and of course a mix of fossil fuel. Because if we truly understand, Mr. Speaker, while we all want to go into renewable energy, we have to make sure that there is something to fall back on if the sun don't shine for 2 weeks. Because when the sun don't shine, your PV system on your rooftop will not produce energy. So we have to make sure that we maintain that balance. We have to make sure that the system is stable. And so while I understand that we want to move quickly, but we have to make sure when we move to ensure that the system is stable and it can provide the energy that we're looking for. So the Renewable Energy Sector Development Project, Mr. Speaker, is really the geothermal project. It's a project costing $21.9 million, which we may never recover, because, and that more or less is a grant given to us by the World Bank to do the final stages of exploration in the country. Whereas we have done previous exploratory exercises, we have discovered that there is geothermal energy, but we were not able to determine the capacity of the geothermal that is under there. So in the coming, as we speak, there is a project officer which has been established, and the consultants are in and out working with the department, We want to make sure that the project is viable. We want to make sure if there is energy that the resource can be generated, and of course the enabling environment to scale up renewables, renewable investment with the private sector is established. Now, Mr. Speaker, the most critical part of this initiative, Mr. Speaker, is the legislation. The old legislation, Mr. Speaker, recognizes one power producer. One power producer in Lucia. That's the only power producer. The legislation surrounds Lucia. In that, Mr. Speaker, Lucia itself owns the power grid, the poles, the electricity, the lines, etc. So no other person can get onto those poles or do anything because they control it. There is an agreement under the law which ends sometime in 2040 thereabout. So as we speak, Mr. Speaker, we have completed the draft legislation, and we're now going into what I call the final bit of consultation to ensure that all the I's are dotted and the T's crossed, with the hope that we can come to Parliament in June for the passage of the new Electricity Act, which will liberalize that sector. What it means, Mr. Speaker, is that it will provide for Lucia to survive, for individuals to be able to set on their rooftops their photovoltaic systems and to produce their own electricity, to be able to consume first, and sell to Lucia, or to consume all and sell all, as they say, to a net metering system to allow you to be able to consume what you require and sell the balance to Lucia. All of these, Mr. Speaker, we need to put together and to ensure that there are regulations controlling and governing this system. It means, Mr. Speaker, with renewable energy, the sector development program, it means that there will be more than one producer, more than one generator. So it's not Lucia alone generating electricity. I will be generating electricity, and I will sell to Lucia to give to those who don't have PV on their rooftops. But we also have another issue to deal with, Mr. Speaker, because the cost of maintaining the grid, the poles and the cables, etc., is that of Lucia. And so we also have to strike a balance as to how much renewable energy that we will allow for independent power producers and the population to generate, and how much Lucia itself should generate to ensure that Lucia itself remains sustainable to maintain that grid. So as we speak about renewables, Mr. Speaker, and we speak about reducing the cost of energy, we also have to think that there is a grid to maintain that we need to depend on, because we will not be totally independent unless we find a resource that is sustainable. And the resource that we're thinking of, Mr. Speaker, if we're able to get it, that can sustain us, is the geothermal resource. Solar will not be able to sustain us entirely. As I said, there'll be days you'll wake up and your solar water heater is cold and your light bulb will be black because you won't have any electricity. So if only, Mr. Speaker, and we're hoping that we can proceed with the project, and the exploration drilling will commence in the coming months. We are looking at a number of places in the Soufrière region. There are 3 to 4 slim wells in Belle Plaine to be done. That's in Fort Saint-Jacques. We have done consultation there already, and I'm hoping that the people have bought into the idea. Montlisa is one, that's in Mondesi, and in Saltibus. And this is to access and confirm the viability, as I said, Mr. Speaker, for development of an estimated 30 megawatt geothermal power plant. The other thing that will happen, Mr. Speaker, is that currently, under the arrangement that exists, an individual is able to generate 5 kilowatts of electricity, and a business place is allowed to generate 25 kilowatts. When the renewable energy system comes into place, when people can now go in freely and get their renewables, get their photovoltaic systems, and get their battery storage, and to be able to store power, generate and store power, the Electricity Act will now provide for an increase in the volume of production for you. So whereas we at 5, it may go up to 25 for domestic. I'm not saying that's where it will go, but it may go up to 25, it may go up to 50, it may go up to 100 to the business places. But the whole idea, as I said early on, is to bring about a balance. This, Mr. Speaker, as a consequence, the project has hired an exploration management consultancy firm, US $3.5 million. There's an engagement of civil and infrastructure works contractors, $1.8 million US, and there's a contractor for drilling services, and that is $13.2 million, Mr. Speaker. All of that money, Mr. Speaker, as we speak now, all of that money is really grant funding. If we find the resource, and the resource is sufficient enough to generate electricity, then it converts into a loan, and the government would have to pay that loan. But what it does, Mr. Speaker, is once you can find the resource, the government pays the loan, but the government can leverage to the private sector and then attract private sector investment to get involved in the project. The project has 5 sources, Mr. Speaker: the Canadian Clean Energy Forest Climate, $3.7 million, Clean Technology Fund, $8.572 million, Canadian Clean Energy and Forest Climate Fund, $0.55 million, and the government of St. Lucia will put $1 million for land acquisition, etc., for the project. Mr. Speaker, out of this project, we were able to get a number of students, a cohort of 10 students who were given scholarships to study and to understand the whole issue of geothermal generation, and to prepare them for the future and possible jobs in the sector. Mr. Speaker, I want to quickly mention that in all of this, you need the regulator. The regulator is the NERC, and the NERC, which was established sometime in 2015, they have been struggling along. They have not been able to attract or generate the resources they require for their sustainability. And this year, the government has decided to give them an increase in their subvention of $250,000, which will assist them in their administration costs in running the office, and to hope that the NERC can improve on its services and to be able to train its members, etc. Once the legislation goes by and the sector is liberated, then it means the LUSLEC will come under the NERC. As it is now, only WASCO is being regulated. LUSLEC is not regulated, except by the Ministry of Infrastructure in terms of the routine inspections that we normally have to do every 2 years. The NERC then will come in and set the regulation, and LUSLEC would have to pay the NERC a percentage of its revenue to keep the NERC going and to be able to give them the necessary professional competence to run the system. So that basically, Mr. Speaker, is the sort of a dashboard of what is expected to happen. We are still pursuing, Mr. Speaker, our target of 35% renewable energy penetration by the year 2025. We're not there yet. We're still a long way ahead, but there is need to push. And one of the ways we will attain this, Mr. Speaker, is the support within the public service to be able to get the necessary competence and manpower needs of the energy unit to be able to pursue our national agenda, but also to capitalize and piggyback on the numerous funding that is out there that we need to go out searching. There's a lot of funding out there, Mr. Speaker. There's the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. Recently, we're able to get them to agree on a $50 million grant loan, which LUSLEC is interested in. But it's just one of many opportunities that exist out there where we can access. The NERC, Mr. Speaker, has done quite a bit of work. The CEO has been really an asset ever since she took up her responsibility, and so the NERC has been able to benefit on training in what we call the National Energy Grid Code, and that is important. The grid code meaning that as you begin to mix the energy and having fossil fuel generation, solar generation, probably ocean tech generation, wind tech generation, and geothermal, all of these, Mr. Speaker, are not generating at the same capacity and the same rhythm, if I should use that term, at any given time. So what you're likely to have, Mr. Speaker, because they're not generating at the same pace, then you'd have instability in the grid, and at your home you'll also have that instability. So you now need to be able to, one, find the details of the technical requirements. So the grid code, Mr. Speaker, is really the code that will tell you what are the technical requirements necessary for you to participate in the national grid, in terms of connecting to and using the grid to ensure that there is stability. So they have done quite a bit of work in that area, Mr. Speaker, and I must commend the Chief Executive Officer and the NERC, the board of the Commission, for the work they have done. They have been able, Mr. Speaker, to get grant funding from the Caribbean Development Bank to do a strategic and operational plan, together with a grievance mechanism for dealing with customer complaints and disputes. And that is the benefit of the renewable energy system. The regulator would be able to put those structures in place and to ensure that persons who have complaints can report and get their complaints dealt with. And so, Mr. Speaker, in an attempt to speed up, I'll skip a few things. We, again, through the NERC, they have been able to also get assistance in dealing with renewable energy pricing and capacity limits, what I just spoke earlier on, to be able to determine at what stage do you give them, how do you regulate the prices?
Remember, you have 5 minutes remaining.
Okay. What contributes to pricing, Mr. Speaker, and to be able to regulate this, and they have been able to get assistance through the Global Green Energy Institute, the GGI. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of initiatives which the NERC has been involved in. They have worked with the World Bank. They have worked with the Regulatory Energy Transition Accelerator. They have done work with the, as I said, the GGI and other regional and international agencies in their effort, Mr. Speaker, to bring about that kind of regulatory mechanism. Mr. Speaker, WASCO is one agency that we need to continue to give support. They are trying, and they fall, Mr. Speaker, at this time, right at a time when the ministry is considering launching a program called Infrastructure 2030. And what Infrastructure 2030, Mr. Speaker, is a determined and deliberate program intended to begin to think beyond now, to think to 2030 and beyond, where this country is likely to go. So if I'm supposed to go by what the Prime Minister said in his budget and the plans which he has, the hotels which are to be built, what it says to me, Mr. Speaker, as Minister for Infrastructure, it means that I need to have the proper road network. I need to have, as Minister for Public Utilities, a strong public utility infrastructure. I need to have in place a strong telecommunications sector, Mr. Speaker. I need to have that environment. I need to have strong sewer facilities and all of these things. And so Infrastructure 2030 gives an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to renew our infrastructure, to ask ourselves, is our infrastructure for water in place? And I can tell you no. Because so often, what do you see? As we build a road, next week it's like Wasco smells the asphalt and they're there digging. But what is happening there, Mr. Speaker, is because of the road construction and the compaction during construction, that vibration, the aging infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, deteriorates to the extent that weeks after or days after, or even during the time of construction, it breaks up. So for us, it is an investment that we have to make to say, let us do an audit of all of our infrastructure. Put in new lines and say, listen, we want lines under there that will last 20 years. Then we build a road that will last 20 years. Then we may take a decision that line should not be under the road pavement, but should be on the side of the road. Then electricity. Where are we going in the next 7 years and beyond, in the year 2030? We speak of a north-south link road from Grosley to Dennery. What is likely to happen? What is likely to happen, Mr. Speaker, is the potential of not just a road, but the opening up of a vista of opportunities, a community, maybe a new village, a tourism place. Then your water requirements, your water needs increases. And you need to have that infrastructure in place. You know, Cabot came to St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. And what did we find? Cabot doesn't have, or we don't have the capacity to pump enough water to Cabot based on the size of that facility. The Royalton came in, and we're having problems. So Infrastructure 2030, Mr. Speaker, is a program that will allow us to be able to review our infrastructure, to augment what is existing, and to put in place an infrastructure plan that will be geared for 2030 and beyond. And that program, Mr. Speaker, we are hoping we can launch this year. Mr. Speaker, I spoke of water. Briefly, I went in. Again, under water and infrastructure is the question of the John Compton Dam. This one is a story by itself. We spent quite a bit of money, Mr. Speaker. A dredging fund was established, and after spending 60 million thereabout, Mr. Speaker, we were only able, and I say we, because whether it's this government or the government before, all that was achieved was 10% dredging. $60 million. And that is an issue we need to deal with, Mr. Speaker, so as to attempt to improve on our water supply and to be able to provide to our people and to the investment that is likely to come into the country. So, Mr. Speaker, there have been also some projects which were undertaken, and they are more or less completing. The Viewford Water Supply Project, the John Compton Dam Spillway, the Dennery North Water Supply Project, an amount of $187,000 and $173,000 being allocated. The rehabilitation and upgrade of the Northern Water Distribution Pipeline, which was
you need to wrap up now?
I will wrap up now, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, this gives you a synopsis of the program of the Department of Infrastructure, which I have not yet touched the issue of airports and seaports and what we are doing there, what we are doing. I have not spoken of the green energy, Caribbean efficient green energy buildings, Mr. Speaker. And if I may indulge, just to quickly indicate that St. Lucia and Grenada has been selected for a World Bank project called Caribbean Efficiency and Green Energy Buildings. And what this is going to do, Mr. Speaker, is really to do an audit of our buildings, public buildings, and other institutions that the government may select, whether quasi-government or government itself, to do an energy audit and to be able to retrofit those buildings to bring about a reduction in your price of electricity consumption. Now, this, Mr. Speaker, is probably the one project that will impact us almost immediately. Geothermal will impact us maybe in the next, I may not be here in the Parliament, may impact us maybe in another 10 years. But energy efficiency, the ability to change your infrastructure, your lighting fixtures and your light bulbs and other amenities to drive your prices down, once we do that, Mr. Speaker, we'll see the prices going down and we'll benefit from it. All the others call for massive investment, whether it's geothermal, etc., etc. I have a bit, Mr. Speaker. I will pass it on to my colleague, Minister for Housing, and he will deal with it. It was just to give you, from a SNASTA's standpoint, information on the position of Slasper and as far as the land at Latop, not Tapion but Latop, which was purchased by a private sector concern. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you very much for your tolerance, your patience, your understanding, and I look forward to your encouragement in the future. And in closing, I also want to say thank you to my staff, my permanent secretaries, and a number of others within the public service. I want to commend the Prime Minister and his staff in the Department of Finance who have worked very hard. I know those days are considered by me because I remember my time, I call it red eye days. You work until 3, 4, and 5 o'clock in the morning and you back up at 7 o'clock to get things going. I want to commend you, sir, on your work and to say thank you and may God bless you.
The member for Babonneau.
Mr. Speaker, I want to take leave at this point to express my condolences to the Gasper family on the passing of their uncle Barthélemy Gasper, who passed away in Canada. He was my former principal when I was a student at the Babonneau Primary School. He was a tough disciplinarian, and I believe all those who went through under his stewardship did very well in life. I want to express condolences to the Davids family from Marguerite in the constituency of Grosile for the passing of their mom. I want to send greetings to the residents of Babonneau in all the communities, starting from Debarra, Bourgis, Laguerre, Montciton, Plateau, Paybush, Gara, Lacroix, Tichimé, Foassor, Chassin, Talvan, Kakojiwa, Hill 20, Kabish, Balata, Timon, and Union Terrace. I want to thank them for their support so far and the confidence that they have placed in me to represent them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate in advance all workers of St. Lucia as we prepare to observe Labor Day. And I expect all my colleagues, we are workers even beyond the call of duty, and we need to celebrate that day that's set aside for us. And they will celebrate the day under the theme embracing fundamental principles and rights at work for greater productivity. On Sunday, Mr. Speaker, on a side, it will be the feast of the Babonneau Good Shepherd Church, and that church was built in 1947, where Father Albert will be officially installed as our parish priest for Babonneau at 4 p.m. by the Archbishop, His Grace, Mass Day. Mr. Speaker, as I turn quickly to the budget presented by the Honorable Prime Minister and Parliamentary Rep for Castries East, I want to use an analogy I coined a few years ago at an annual general meeting in Castries South, the Castries South constituency of the St. Lucia Labour Party, where at the time Honorable Robert Lewis was the parliamentary representative. I described St. Lucia at the time as a vehicle which had a reckless driver, and it was overturned and was left with all four wheels up in a pool of mud. This was the description that St. Lucia carried at the time. And before July 2021, on the 26th of July, I also described St. Lucia in that same state. But at the time I said, with a vehicle in that state, there came a mechanic, an experienced driver, who went to pull this vehicle out of the mud, put it back on its wheels, repaired it, and then set it as ready to roll again. Well, Mr. Speaker, that is what is happening again when we use the letters PJP. Pull, Joseph, pull. And what this mechanic and driver has done, he has basically pulled St. Lucia out of that mud and put it back on the road for us to roll. That is how I describe this budget. Mr. Speaker, I am so focused on the goal of helping to improve the quality of life for St. Lucians that I spend very little time and energy focusing on those who destroyed the country and left it in unnecessary debt, which this government has to honor. Mr. Speaker, pour l'État gouvernement ça là amassé Saint-Lucie 28 juillet 2031. Excellent gouvernement ça là entré à bas conduite premier ministre qui sorti Castries East avec Nakawe avec 18 mois ils ont tiré cette Lucie en canal là la bois, ils ont nettoyé, ils ont repayé et puis ils mettent au chimère pour nous ça rouler, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the 26th of July, after the victory of the St. Lucia Labour Party, the Prime Minister assigned me the responsibility for the Ministry of the Public Service, Home Affairs, Labour and Gender Affairs. We haven't had a conversation about that up to today after 18 months. We just have to continue to do what we have to do. But Mr. Speaker, the Department of the Public Service is what will help this budget become a reality. And everything I say here, Mr. Speaker, I will link it to the theme of the budget, health and security, the pillars for sustainability. And without a strong public service, no matter what plans, what ideas, how much money is allocated, we will not see the results. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we are getting ready to reform and modernize the public service in order to get the wheel of government to turn at a faster rate. In preparing for public sector reform and modernization, this will be a huge undertaking, but we must and have to restructure the public service. Failure to do this means the government's operations will be doom and gloom. Mr. Speaker, when I looked at the budget, I went from page to page and I'm saying, where is the public service? Where is my department? And Mr. Speaker, it dawned on me that the public service and my departments are all over the budget because they have to make this budget a reality. Mr. Speaker, as stated in the budget under the theme Health and Security as Pillars for Sustainability, we must uphold the principles articulated, which speaks to inclusiveness, accountability, equity, meritocracy, and rule of law. And Mr. Speaker, we have a challenge to keep law and order in this country, because there had been a breakdown of law and order prior to this government coming in. And that is why today, Mr. Speaker, we hear all the challenges dealing with violent behavior in this country. We need a public service which will adhere to the principles. One, the first step is to design and enact new legislation to start the process to effect changes and the culture of the public service to get greater productivity. And that is how we will achieve health and security and stability and sustainability in this country. Mr. Speaker, we have had several sessions to look at the Public Service Management Bill and Regulation. And Mr. Speaker, you need to note that the last time we had the staff orders for the public service in St. Lucia, that was on August 25th, 1983. And this tells us how old our laws are, and therefore we need to move in time. Si nous pas changer ces vieilles lois ça là, moun kay continue ka ba bien, bi yo pa ka joindre bon service, le gouvernement ka travail. We have to change these laws. The staff orders, people working for government, we have to review these laws so that they can give the public efficient, effective and quality service on a daily basis. C'est pour ça au gouvernement ka pour taxe, Premier ministre ka collect taxe, il ka prêter l'argent et qui ka payer moun qui ka travaille by gouvernement pour bailler ces moun bon service. The need for a public service management bill was recognized about 2 decades ago. We have that bill there, almost 2 decades. And that was done by a legal consultant. Now we are reviewing the legislation so that we can make this the new law under which this government will govern. Mr. Speaker, we had multi-stakeholders consultation to look at the regulation. The Public Service Management Bill will look at new areas of promoting efficiency and effectiveness. The Public Service Bill must look at public service principles, values, objectives, and policies. That was not in the staff orders, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we have to look at the general conduct of public officers, Mr. Speaker. That is the only way, Mr. Speaker, we can have a country that is healthy and safe when we have officers who are working and giving their best. Mr. Speaker, the bill that we want will focus on safety and health in the public service. And you heard, Mr. Speaker, how my colleagues in Parliament talk about the issue of mold. And this is costing the government millions of dollars. Employees are staying away from work. They cannot work in the environment. And the taxpayers' money has to be collected to correct that on a regular basis. It's like every day we have a wildcat action where some institution somewhere is closed, because my department deals with facilities, and before we clean up, we deal with mold. Sooner rather than later, Mr. Speaker, we have to go to another one. So, Mr. Speaker, as we look at the way forward in this budget, we have to ensure as stated earlier by the Minister for Infrastructure, that the buildings, the conditions under which we work has to be safe and secure. Mr. Speaker, in the budget, the Prime Minister spoke about collective bargaining and collective agreement, and the bill will also address that, Mr. Speaker. We are looking at code of ethics and regulations for public officers. If we do not have discipline, we do not have ethics in the public service, we will not realize the goals of the budget. It will be like spinning top in mud. The money that we collect, the money that we spend, the programs that we want to implement, we will not see the results. Mr. Speaker, we are moving in the technological age, and the Ministry of the Public Service is responsible for the public sector modernization development strategy, which is aligned to the 2023-24 budget. And this is a huge project in the public service. The scope of the project, which costs approximately $12.6 million US, and we want persons to embrace that, or else that money will go to waste. Mr. Speaker, sans arriver, côté nous pas qu'à faire bagay kon ti boutique. This budget is there to advance St. Lucia, bring St. Lucia to the next level. And based on the programs identified under the different sectors and the plans of the Honorable Prime Minister, we need the modernization, the technology to help us achieve that. Mr. Speaker, the public service is the clearinghouse of all government's human resource management and training or development. It has the responsibility to build organizational structures among all government agencies, as well as maintenance of all government facilities. In the coming months, we will explore the possibility of bringing all units of the public service under one roof for greater cohesion, coordination, and to develop a new culture of operation for better customer service. Mr. Speaker, our digital transformation strategy is already bringing results. Government is already saving millions of dollars when we go in the technological world. And the digital transformation strategy focuses on business, education, health, tourism, agriculture, and government. It will involve citizens and society, businesses, and the public service. And when you look at this budget, Mr. Speaker, we are focusing on improving business community. We want to improve the quality of education. We speak to the laptop and all the things that government is putting in education. And this budget focuses on health and quality of health. We talk of tourism, which is the mecca generating revenue for this country. We need agriculture for food security and safety, and we need good governance. Mr. Speaker, we have to focus on the policy pillars and accelerators that will focus on digital transformation, governance and funding, digital community skills and training, integrated digital architecture and infrastructure, and digital security and trust. The introduction of online service to do business with government will result in huge savings to government, and the main objective is to deliver quality service to the public and in a more efficient and effective manner. So, Mr. Speaker, when I look at this budget, we move quickly to the Department of Gender. And the Department of Gender speaks to equality between men and women in all aspects of the society. This is a department, Mr. Speaker, you would not have seen reflected heavy in the budget, because this department is almost self-sufficient in terms of their projects and programs. And I have always said that when we put gender on the agenda, others put us on their agenda. Because a lot of support is out there to ensure that there is gender equality between men and women. And for this reason, we have a number of projects going on in the gender department. But what this government has done is to provide the infrastructure, where the Prime Minister has given the gender department the request in terms of physical space and additional staff for them to be able to deliver. Mr. Speaker, we have the National Gender Equality Policy, which we are going to implement in this financial year. Avec la nous garder situation madame et monsieur, nous ka parler côté madame et monsieur ni pour égal. Yon pas ni pour devant, yon pas ni pour derrière. Là madame et monsieur maé yo ka chebe yon bolot, yon pas ka devant l'autre là pas ka derrière. So yon ni pour égalité, yon ni pour ni égalité. So that is what we talk about, equality in gender. And Mr. Speaker, when we talk about security, we talk about violence and some of the ill or antisocial behavior in our country. This is what the Prime Minister spoke at length on this issue in the budget. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we have to look at the elimination of gender-based violence. You must not dislike somebody because the person is a man or because the person is a woman. You must not beat somebody because the person is a man or because the person is a woman. This is not tolerated. And that is what we call gender-based violence, that some people are receiving violent acts, especially women and girls, because they are women. And therefore the country has legislation to speak to that. Mr. Speaker, we have to look at the governance and gender mainstreaming. And this government has taken a policy decision that it will mainstream gender in all its programs. So when we look at all the projects that we have in the budget, Mr. Speaker, we have to look in the implementation process to ensure that both men and women are treated equally. And that is what we mean by gender mainstreaming in the budget. So when the Prime Minister speaks to construction, he speaks to agriculture, he speaks to tourism, any project that the government implements, we have to check to see whether men and women are treated equally and fairly. Mr. Speaker, women are playing a very important role in economic development in the country. And we speak to women's economic empowerment and environmental sustainability, recognizing the contributions of women, especially women in rural settings, for food security and environmental sustainability. The government of St. Lucia, and this budget speaks across, the goal is to alleviate poverty, which is strategically rooted in skills development, including financial literacy and business development and management. A lot of women, Mr. Speaker, were not venturing into business because they have the nurturing personality behavior where they take care of their family and their children, and they would not want to venture into business. But now the world of work has opened up, and women are taking advantage of this opportunity. And when we speak to the youth economy, we speak to the micro, small, and medium businesses. We speak to community tourism. We speak to agriculture and the 7 crop. Mr. Speaker, the women are coming out. They are coming out there to participate in the economic activity of this country. And Mr. Speaker, with their participation, I can assure you, Prime Minister, that you are going to see an exponential growth in the economy and in economic activities, because women have been left out in the mainstream of the economy. And with their presence and the opportunity afforded to them in this budget, they are going to take advantage of that opportunity to propel economic growth and development in this country. Mr. Speaker, I just want to alert you that the government has taken a decision to establish gender focal points in every ministry. And that focal point involves financial analysts, planners, and heads of departments who will be busy in ensuring that the government programs are gender sensitive. Mr. Speaker, we have the issue of gender-based violence, and we need to stop it. We have done training. We are involving the Ministry of Health. We are involving the Department of Justice and Policing and social workers in the public sector and civil society to ensure a minimum standard of service for gender-based violence. Last year, Mr. Speaker, the Gender Affairs Department trained 50 police officers in how to handle cases of domestic violence. A booklet was developed for the use by the police and other agencies on domestic violence. And that is where we begin to tap and fight and stem the issue of crime and violence in the country. It must start in the home. It must start in the family. It must go into the schools and all the other social partners. The Prime Minister has made a commitment to support all programs and to promote gender equality in the society. Hence, he has demonstrated that by his actions. One, the appointment of a commissioner of police who is a woman. The president of the Senate who is a woman, and I see her present in this group, so the eyes have it. The appointment of 4 women senators and many women on boards and commission. And I'm saying that St. Lucia is becoming the envy of the region because the statistics are changing, and they have done an analysis and they have seen that St. Lucia has done very well during the last year when it comes to gender issues in its programs and projects. We may not be paying attention to it, but the regional and international communities are paying very close attention to that. And Prime Minister, I'm telling you, you are doing very well in that direction. Don't let the people tell you other things. Don't be distracted, you are on track. Mr. Speaker, we are going to establish the one-stop center, and that's for survivors of gender-based violence. They need a place, they need counseling, they need shelter. And therefore, we have identified a location which will cater. We are getting the funding. All they needed was the physical space. And the Department of Gender Affairs, in collaboration with the social health, police and justice sector, we are working to put that in place. The department is supported by the Caribbean Development Bank and the United Nations Women in this initiative. So that is where the funding is coming from for this program. Mr. Speaker, As we speak to this budget, I'm just adding the other component where just this week I addressed about 20 women who participated in a training for business women in a Build Back Equal project. That is because of COVID, a lot of women had lost their jobs and the economic situation had gotten worse. And therefore the project is called Build Back Equal. That means while we're building back, we must ensure there is equality. And this is financed by UN Women and the Canadian government. It's a $2 million project, and the Prime Minister was present at the launching of this project in St. Lucia. He attended and he addressed the gathering about almost a year ago. And I told them they were taking too long to start the implementation, so it's just start rolling now. So sometimes we talk about certain things and it takes almost another year or 2 years before it starts. However, I was pleased to address the participants on Wednesday this week, and they were on fire. They were very excited, and they have positioned themselves to benefit from the grant, from the micro, small, and medium-sized business. So Minister for Soufre, Parliamentary Rep for Soufre, and Minister for Commerce, you will see more applications coming in. Some might be going after the youth economy, and some might go after agriculture or tourism, community tourism. The participants were fortunate to have an excellent presenter from Nigeria to facilitate the session. The training focused on leadership capabilities, decision-making, conflict resolution, emotional intelligence, team leadership, and consensus building. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of policy changes we need to explore to improve efficiency. And that would include in the Gender Relations Unit, a Gender Policy and Mainstreaming Unit. So we are trying to improve the structure within the Gender Department. So one section will address gender relations, and the other section will look at the policy and gender mainstreaming. And there we will have a director. So it's just a reconfiguration of the department to address that. We need a legal officer and we need a data analyst. Mr. Speaker, I move quickly to the Department of Labor. Mr. Speaker, to reduce crime and violence and improve health care, it is important to note on page 7 of the budget, the Prime Minister stated that the Labour Party came from the bosom of the labor movement, and therefore we have to remain true to the cause of workers and protect and defend them, especially the vulnerable ones. And he called for the protection to ensure that they receive a fair day's wage for a fair day's work. That's in the budget, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, the budget speaks to the Minimum and Equity Wage Commission. This commission started work in earnest and have since given a preliminary report to me as Minister of Labor to obtain feedback before the final document is prepared for presentation to the Prime Minister and Cabinet of Ministers. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister speaks to negotiations. And when we look at page 9, you would have noticed that, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister paid $18.3 million back pay to public servants and $4.4 million to Liat and Majestic workers, former employees of these two entities. And the workers of St. Lucia have applauded the Prime Minister for honoring the obligation of this government, and therefore they hope, when you whet their appetite, they just look for more. But we are hoping that they understand that this is a responsibility that this government had, and we have no choice but to honor that. The Prime Minister has given instruction, Mr. Speaker, to put the necessary mechanisms in place to commence negotiations with public sector unions, which should commence shortly, and he also would like to end it within the shortest period of time to avoid any accumulation of huge back pay. The Prime Minister is afraid of the back pay. The figures are huge. So we need to negotiate in a timely manner so that we do not build back pay. I have also informed, Mr. Speaker, the unions that all collective agreements will be examined to check if there are any unresolved matters which could be dealt with before the start of negotiation. Because many times, Mr. Speaker, the unions negotiate a collective agreement, half of the things are not implemented and they are going into another round. And some of the issues are not very huge matters. They are some that this government might be able to address even before we start the next round of negotiation. Mr. Speaker, I've been dealing with the unions on a regular basis to resolve many burning issues to maintain the industrial peace in the country. They have been keeping my life busy, but the dialogue continues. Mr. Speaker, the government is committed to building social dialogue among government, employers, and trade unions, so we can have broader participation with key stakeholders in decision making, and consequently, it will put mechanisms in place to formalize this arrangement by establishing a tripartite committee. That discussion was held with the Trade Union Federation, and they have welcomed the idea. We have discussed it with the Employers Federation, and they too welcome the idea that with social dialogue we can resolve a lot of problems and avoiding conflict. Mr. Speaker, this government established the Labor Tribunal and, as we mentioned, the Minimum Wage Commission. The challenge we have, Mr. Speaker, is to obtain the necessary resources to support them to function in a more effective manner, and I have promised to engage them to explore what can be done to improve the operating environment. And Mr. Speaker, I can share with you that when the new Labor Tribunal took over, there were over 57 outstanding cases there. And some workers and employers had almost given up. And when they get calls that their cases will be heard, they became very excited that we have a labor tribunal that is going to put peace between workers and employers. Mr. Speaker, as we move on, we look forward to all of you at the May Day rally, which will be held at the Financial Center on Monday. That's why government has the day off. So according to the Prime Minister, don't put any other activity to clash with your May Day celebration. So we want all the workers in St. Lucia to find some time for rest and relaxation, and we want parliamentarians to find time to rest. The Prime Minister said this is a very stressful job, and that is the day for all workers, because some people tend to feel that employers are not workers. They are workers. All of us are workers. And the Cabinet of Ministers and parliamentarians have asked that we form our union. We'll have to form our union so that we get proper representation. When citizens and constituents take advantage of us, we need representation. So we'll form that organization, we'll register it so that we can express our grievances when the employees and some persons put us on the streets. What you say, Mr. Speaker, you would want some union representation too? Mr. Speaker, I move quickly to the Department of Home Affairs. And my colleague Minister, Parliamentary Rep for Library, is not here today because he would have liked me to share that with him. And we shared a joke, and I told him he's Minister of External Affairs, and I am Minister of Home Affairs. So when the Prime Minister sees him in cabinet, he will ask him, what are you doing here? You are supposed to be external. So he likes that joke. And if I told the Prime Minister, then I have to travel to go whatever meeting. He tell me, no, you cannot go because you are Minister of Home Affairs. You have to stay home and take care of affairs. So, Mr. Speaker, the Department of Home Affairs, as stated in the budget by the Prime Minister, speaks to security as a priority for this financial year. I am pleased on the approach the Prime Minister has taken in combating the upsurge in criminal activities in St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, he is recommending a holistic approach and that it is not left to the police and government, meaning politicians. Although some politicians on the other side, they feel they are not in it. And I have said, Mr. Speaker, that the problems that we have in criminal activities, no matter where in the island, usually it's a bad seed that was sown, and we are harvesting the bad fruits now. And therefore, this government cannot just take blame for what is happening. We have to check what happened before. Did we ensure that there was law and order? Did we ensure that we planted good seeds so that today we can harvest good fruits? Mr. Speaker, I've always felt that we cannot just blame the government and the police for an escalation in criminal activity. It is not just about the police. Since I last reported to this House, Mr. Speaker, I have engaged the representatives of the Borderland Welfare Association. I have visited the SSU to check the conditions under which they work. And Mr. Speaker, I can tell you since my visit, there has been a great improvement, because I don't want to tell you what I saw, but they sent me the photos and the Prime Minister put the resources so that our law enforcement officers have a decent environment to work. Mr. Speaker, the Royal St. Lucia Police Force and the Police Welfare Association, the Probation and Parole Unit, the Fire Service Officers, the Trade Union Federation, the National Workers Union, all the public sector and non-public sector unions have been engaging me on a number of issues, those relating to the collective agreements that are not resolved, and we are getting our permanent secretaries from the various ministries to address these issues. I have been making the effort to engage them and to maintain a line of communication among all the unions. That is important, Mr. Speaker. The police will seek to improve public perception through community involvement in crime fighting, thereby enhancing citizen security and safety. Adoption of technological improvement in intelligence gathering, improvement in police radar equipment, and in police outreach and public relations program. That is coming in this budget as presented by the Honorable Prime Minister. They want to adopt a proactive approach to crime prevention and problem solving to improve citizen security. They are receiving an additional 15 police officers for the establishment of a major crime unit and increased patrols. The procurement of equipment for major crimes unit and to pay license of special police equipment. For example, Mr. Speaker, I've made a call here, and I will say it again, that in the Department of Education, we need to increase school attendant officers. COVID-19 did not do justice to our youth. They were left idle. They didn't have anything to do, and therefore some criminal elements have preyed on these children. And Mr. Speaker, I continue to say that when we see the persons who are involved in some of the heinous criminal activities, they are very young persons. And therefore, we have to prevent and not cure. Mr. Speaker, to create a safe for road traffic environment through public sensitization, enforcement of traffic laws, and stakeholder collaboration. To purchase additional police vehicles, implement traffic management project, procurement of equipment for police visibility project. All these are enshrined in this budget to improve security in this country. Mr. Speaker, the government is also embarking on a vexing issue among the protective services, and the Prime Minister has committed that we will address the matter. And right now, as we speak, Mr. Speaker, we have some experts on the ground that are involved in revisiting the benchmark qualification for the protective services, and they should give a report very soon. That will address a lot of the teething problems we have with the way protective officers are promoted. And it was one where the promotions were aligned to certification. And we have discovered that when we look at what happens in other countries, that the protective services require very, very good skills, abilities, and experience for them to perform well. Not how many degrees you have, is how well you are on the ground. To deliver a professional police service through capacity building, training, and human resource management, the Prime Minister has quadrupled, triple, double, exponentially increased the budget for training of the protective services. Mr. Speaker, you would have heard the story that when we came in, the last government did not see the need to give our officers the skills and the knowledge that they need for them to do their work. And this Prime Minister has increased that. In fact, this year he increased it by another $300,000. Mr. Speaker, we have to look at regularization of salaries for special constables, training, which represents an increase in the police training vault, repairs to police facilities, drug squad building, rental of new premises for immigration units and other police facilities. To create border management in collaboration with other law enforcement agencies and stakeholders. The commencement of a witness protection program. This government is investing heavily in national security, security and safety of our people, and we want our St. Lucians to play their part. Work with the law enforcement officers, because when you protect your neighbor, you are also protecting yourself. It's not about them, it is about us. Mr. Speaker, in immigration, we have to deal with the issue of immigration and passports, which has caused much distress to the general public. Government has identified a new location for the department to operate in the near future. We are just awaiting some of the retrofitting work to be completed before they can move to that new location. Government has paid for 175,000 passports. So there will not be a shortage of passports. So those persons whose passports are not due for renewal, there is no need to rush because there will be passports. And the border management system, which gives us, yes, they can use their own until it expires. The border management system is now in operation. So there is that single window where you can see all persons who enter and exit this country through legal means. So we have the ED online forms for persons traveling in and out of the country. You don't have to go and fill in this form. You can do it online to save time. So we have made some significant progress in this direction. The Marine Unit has received some attention, especially in the area of training and some equipment to improve on their work. The Fire Service has requested a new Fire Service headquarters, and therefore the Prime Minister has put in some allocation to start the process. So the feasibility work is starting. They are due to get 4 new fire vehicles for the stations in Grosile and George F.L. Charles. And the big story, Mr. Speaker, Borderley Correctional Facility. Borderley will be receiving the best allocation in 20 years, as stated by a high-ranking officer of the Borderley Correctional Facility. This is the first time they have seen such a heavy investment in this facility. I have visited Borderley Correctional Facility 4 times since I became Minister for Home Affairs. I have done a tour of the facility twice, and I have held meeting with management 3 times. My most recent visit was last week, where we conducted an assessment of the level of progress made since the introduction of the review report and the appointment of a new director. The outcome of the exercise, Mr. Speaker, revealed that the facility has been making great strides. Most of the short-term recommendations have been achieved. There is almost a complete turnaround in the institution. The facility is rapidly developing into a rehabilitation center. The inmates have planted 3,000 plantain and banana plants, 2,000 dashing plants. They have rabbits, they have pigs, and they are to receive 3,500 chickens.
You have 10 minutes left.
Yeah. I need about 15 minutes.
Member for January North.
Mr. Speaker, I move for the invocation of Standing Order 3210 to allow the Honourable Member for Baburo an additional 15 minutes within which to complete her presentation.
Honourable members, the question is that we invoke Standing Order 3210 to allow the member for Babino an additional 15 minutes in which to conclude a presentation. And now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I noticed the Minister of Agriculture is smiling. And they tell me to say it in Creole.
That's right.
L'année à Bordelais, nous, c'est mon qui a l'argent là, ils ont planté 3,000 plants bananes et puis figues, 2,000 plants d'achine, et qu'ils ont établi farm pool, quand ils ont 3,500 gibier dedans là. Ils ont cochon, ils ont lapin, avec ils ont dit pour demander si on a des bœufs. They said they need cows. So anybody who can donate them 2 cows, that would be very good for them. The Prime Minister has made an allocation to fence the institution to improve security. We'll purchase a vehicle and equipment for officers. They just received 25 new recruits to improve on the number of staff. They have received support from stakeholders to construct a playing field for the inmates, and they have been involved in football competition in the constituency of Honorable Parliamentary Rep for Dennery North. So that is what we talk about, rehabilitation. I visited the sewing unit. They will be involved in repairing of furniture. So we are seeing that the inmates are treated with some level of dignity. I participated in a symposium they had a show, and they are very talented, and therefore we need to make use of this talent while they are inside there. Mr. Speaker, while we speak on security, the Department of Home Affairs is getting ready to launch the Youth at Risk Unit. The preliminary work has been completed, and it is a unit that will help in the coordination of all agencies on activities involving vulnerable youth. All the necessary groundwork has been established, and we should launch the unit soon. Mr. Speaker, when I examined the budget, I noticed that St. Lucia records economic growth of 18.1%, as it is the largest economy in the OECS. This is good news, Mr. Speaker. This is an indication of good leadership, good financial management. And I kept telling you the Prime Minister has a calculator, but I'll not tell you what keys that are on them. That calculator gets it right. Mr. Speaker, there is one fundamental principle I learned in leading any organization, and that is, a good leader takes only 2 years to turn an organization around. And the Prime Minister has 3 more months to go, and he has already turned St. Lucia around. Mr. Speaker, we have a government that is people-centered. That is why the opposition cannot stomach the phrase, putting people first. I have no difficulty with the phrase, Mr. Speaker, because this is what I have been doing all my life. All my life. In the teaching profession and in the trade union movement, and as a community activist, I have always been putting people first. So I'm in the right place at the right time among the right people for the right reason. Mr. Speaker, I listened to my colleagues and I looked at the budget, and I'm putting everyone on notice that I am the minister who has very little to give to other ministries. I am waiting for support from all ministers to develop my constituency. So, Minister of Agriculture, I'm waiting for support for my farmers who have been crying for help with drainage and irrigation. I have prepared, Mr. Minister of Agriculture, I have prepared some gas vouchers to help them in the dry season. 57 farmers will benefit from that. They are crying. They cannot water their plants. So I'm waiting for the rest from you. No, we'll wait, because we are waiting for that to ease up before they irrigate. Although when too much rain comes, they get flooding. We are starting our kitchen garden competition, Minister of Agriculture. So we are waiting for the support When I check on you, the Prime Minister, you tell me check the Prime Minister. When I check the Prime Minister tell me check you. So I want to know who to check. So we want to see agriculture moving in the constituency. Minister of Youth and Sports, I need your support. We have started some work, and the playing fields at Babono are in a total mess. The last government just ignored that. They put stadium, they put thing, and the field, the outfield is not good. The players, especially the lager field, nobody goes and play on that field. When you walk on that field, you see the kind of holes. You swear it's smooth when you look at the grass, but when you walk in, Mr. Speaker, it's a mess. Babono was one time described as the sports capital of St. Lucia, and I will not allow it to slip away. Yes, Babono, not me that coined it. Find out, check your history. When we had Lavon Spencer in the Olympic, we have Albert Reynolds. We have, no, just check the records, not me. Just, right? The sports capital where we had persons in all different walks of sports, not just one person that excelled in one area, you know. And you heard the Minister of Sports spoke earlier, and I will tell you, Mr. Speaker. No. That's when he was in Marshall. I will need support. I'm starting the resurfacing of the playing field near the Babono Secondary School. The students here do not have a playing area, and the principal has been asking. We have mobilized the equipment, it's already there, but because of the rain, and I have spoken to the Minister of Sports, Youth and Sports, and we should get some support there so that we can create that space for the children to release their energy. The equipment, as I said, is there, and we should start soon. Mr. Speaker, my interest in sports is there, and I noticed the condition of the washroom at the Foasa playing field, the home ground of football in Babono. And when you have new generation football team, that's their home ground. And therefore, I had to go ahead and repair that toilet for them to use it. I also started the rehabilitation of the lager toilet facility, which was vandalized during the time of the last administration. It requires major works, but what we have done, we have sealed it so people do not continue to vandalize it. We put doors and metal doors to secure, and we await support from the Ministry of Youth and Sports to do that. The Minister of Local Government and Housing, we have been doing renovations on 4 community centers, Mr. Speaker. The Lage Community Center, the Bogis Community Center, the Debara Community Center, and the Foasa Community Center. And major improvements around the Babono Multipurpose Center. Mr. Speaker, we could not wait. We just had to move because these facilities were abandoned during the last 5 years, and therefore we had to make them habitable. Minister of Infrastructure, I'm constructing 6 bus shelters and a bridge in Timon. We have spoken about that, so we'll see how we get in help. And we have spoken about the Babono-Grosile Link Road. That one, Minister or Parliamentary Rep for Grosile and Babono will not rest on that one. It is one for major economic activity for St. Lucia. It's going to reduce on the traffic on the highway. There are a lot of benefits from it. And I recall my husband said from the time he was cabinet secretary many decades ago, that was drawn to the attention of the government. So I think he will feel very pleased if you see finally government will address that. So it's not an issue that just came out. It has been there for many decades. I need help. I have erected many road signs, Mr. Speaker, and directions, so you can move around Babono with greater ease so that you don't feel lost. The constituents are anxiously awaiting the street lights for their own safety. And we have agreed, Minister of Infrastructure, Parliamentary Rep for Castries North, that when we complete the potholing and repair of the existing roads, we will declare Babono to be a hole-less or no-hole road community. Because we are going to take on the responsibility to continue to maintain that road and make it motorable for all motorists. Mr. Speaker, I just want to remind the Minister of Infrastructure that there is a link road between Gara and Bogis, which was started by the last parliamentary rep. And the people are clamoring, they want to see that road completed. So I look forward to seeing it back on the agenda for completion. Minister of Tourism and Creative Industries, I just want to remind you that Babono is known for culture and agriculture. Thanks for giving us a small window for us to showcase jazz and carnival in our community. We are bringing life back to Babono because Babono had been sleeping and snoring for the last 5 years. Under Ezekiel. So we want our fair share of celebration. Babono had a very rich cultural background, all that is disappearing. Kele, all the drumming, the history is there, but we are losing it. Okay? So with your support, we are going to bring that back. We also want our share of our community tourism. That is important. Minister of Commerce, we want to establish our cooperative. Long time ago, Babono used to have a cooperative. That disappeared decades. We want to set up our community foundation for Babono. Minister of Equity, so far so good. But I have 3 small communities I'm getting ready to transform. And all the areas will be supported. Sometimes we try to talk about poverty and improving the quality of life. But Mr. Speaker, what we have to do, we have to transform the community, not just giving little handout. So we are starting with 1, a major cleanup. 2, housing will come in with housing repair. Then we have the bundle from Flow where they have internet. We'll get the devices for the children. We create employment for the people there. And they will transform that area. There are 3 communities in Babono. We really need to do that transformation. Mr. Speaker, the budget that we have in front of us, I describe it as a budget which is pregnant. It has just gone into labor and it will soon deliver what the St. Lucian people have been waiting for. The social support is necessary in all aspects of national development. This budget is a comprehensive budget. It touches on the fabrics of society. It caters for all persons in the society. All we have to do is to implement in a timely manner so that we can bring services to our people. Mr. Speaker, I give 100+ support to this budget as presented by the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, and Parliamentary Rep for Castries East. Let me take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to thank the Almighty God for the strength and health to serve the people of St. Lucia. In a capacity as Parliamentary Representative for Babono, and let me thank the Prime Minister for his trust and confidence in me to hold the fort in the Public Service, Home Affairs, Labour and Gender Affairs, and thank the supporters from my constituency for their confidence in me. I want to thank my cabinet colleagues for their support and cooperation and camaraderie. Let me thank my husband, Mr. Victor Poyot, who has accused me of neglecting him when I put the people first. Order. And my brothers and nieces and nephews, especially my niece, Mr. Speaker, who played the role of Prime Minister when his preschool visited the Prime Minister. She's an admirer of the Prime Minister. My secretary at the constituency office, Calda Sebastien, my personal assistant, Marilyn, Dr. Tekla Fitz-Lewis, for her support in coordinating events in Babono, Mr. Linus Justin, project supervisor, and many, many others. Mr. Speaker, I thank them for the support. I thank them for the encouragement. Let me thank my staff in the public service, home affairs, labor and gender affairs. My permanent secretary in the Department of Public Service, Ms. Janet Bernard, and Deputy Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Sheila Imbat. Permanent Secretary in the Department of Home Affairs, Dr. Elizabeth Bailey, and her deputy, Mr. Ricky Quinlan, and all the other heads of departments in the ministry. A special word of appreciation to Ambassador of the Republic of China, Taiwan, His Excellency Peter Chen, and Ambassador of Venezuela. They have been very supportive of the people of Babono. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for your attention as I close by giving my unconditional support to the Appropriation Bill for 2023-2024 as presented by the Honorable Parliamentary Representative for Castries East and the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Do you have government business?
Mr. Speaker, I move that this House be suspended until 2 p.m.
Honourable members, the question is that this House do stand suspended until 2 p.m. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting suspended.
All right.
Well, viewers and listeners, as you just heard, the sit-in has been suspended until 2 p.m. this afternoon. Speaking today, the Minister for Infrastructure, that is the member for Castries North, in the person of former Prime Minister. He used to be a former Prime, he is a former Prime Minister, I beg your pardon, Stephenson King, and the member for Babono, who just sat, Dr. Virginia Albert Poyot. She is the Minister for Labour. We will be back here at 2 o'clock this afternoon. We have a number of people still left to make their contributions. We have the people of the member for Labrie. He's the Minister for Foreign Affairs. Former Prime Minister Kenny Anthony, the member for Beaufort South. And you have the Deputy Prime Minister in the person of Mr. Ernest Hilaire, who is the member for Castries South. And then we also have the member for Central Castries, the Honorable Richard Frederick. And the leader of the opposition is yet to make an appearance today. So I suppose that he would be here this afternoon. These are the people who are yet to make their contributions to this the appropriations bill of $1,856,719,000. So join us at 2 o'clock. Michael, you would like to say a few words before we go?
Je me dis bonjour, vite-là, pour les gens ici, c'était un pays qui a regardé nous à cette station télévision indienne. Venu au bout de session, ça c'est le deuxième jour de débat à ce budget qui est présenté par le Premier ministre honorable Philippe J. Pierre mardi. Avalé $1,856,719 c'est pour l'argent qui a été dépensé et l'argent qui a entré en tout pour l'année 2023 pour 2024 avec Winston. C'est bon, aujourd'hui nous tenons deux membres qui présentés, deux membres parlement qui présentés, nous tenons commencé et puis membre parlement pour Nord-Castry, ça c'est honorable Stephenson King, Premier ministre l'an passé, et aussi après nous tenons membre parlement pour Babono, honorable Dr. Virginia Albert Poyot qui en est fini avec le point anti-pause pour déjeuner avec nous avons dévié à 10 heures. À l'Essala, nous avons invité pour virer brancher puis nous avons représenté exactement ce qui a passé en cas de constitution. Non, Winston avec l'instant séminaire, nous avons merci un peu avec accord, nous avons invité pour virer brancher puis nous à 10 heures, nous avons viré commencer.